Hi everyone, it's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel and today's sled ornament finishing tutorial. Today I'm going to share how I finished this really fun sled. This was the bonus finishing tutorial for the Sleigh Ride Sal 2023 featuring the Chantal's 141 design sled ornament. So we used the large sled for the finishing tutorial, and now we're going to use or create an ornament using a portion of the Rudolph's Reindeer Games chart. We stitched the reindeer and he is going to fit perfectly on this sled. So I have wanted to create some sort of ornament with this sled since it was released last year, part of the mystery ornament box that Chantal offered, and now it is available. You can get as many of these cuties as you want to, but I wanted to do a different finishing than what we did for the sleigh, the large sled, as an option. Both techniques could be, either technique, I guess I should say, could be used for either one. This is simply another idea. So this is some red paint. This is Tommy Art mineral paint. You could use any kind of paint that you want. This paint is fantastic. I have absolutely been loving it. If you've watched my Flosstube Summer Sal, then you will know that I use this paint for that finishing tutorial as well. So the red color I used is called Ruby. And then when it was dry, I went ahead and I moved my tape, or, put some tape in, new tape in other areas. And I am using dark walnut. Now, something to keep in mind about paint, rather than a stain, which the distress ink we used for the sled, the large sled, did. It is going to cover the wood grain. If you don't mind that, then paint is a great option. And let's be real, the stitch is going to go in the main area of this. However, I will show you how I'm going to create more of a distressed type of look. Now, I applied a couple of coats as my ornament and as the paint dried. Another thing, or another note of interest about an ornament compared to a larger finish, you may want to finish both sides of your ornaments, simply because if you can see back behind it, or if you're like me and you have a spinning Christmas tree, it might show if you have an unfinished back. So I did paint the front and the back of this. Now, after my initial painting, I did take a soft sanding block, and I'm going to sand this, and I'm going to sand it pretty good. And you'll notice I'm using this piercing tool, stylus tip, whatever you've got, to remove some of the paint from the crack there in the sled. That is because the paint does tend to want to gather in there. I am sanding off quite a bit of paint, but it's not taking off as much paint as I would like it to, if that makes sense. This distresses it really nicely. It looks good. Again, if you want a little bit more of a lightly distressed finish, this is awesome. If you don't want it distressed at all, then I wouldn't sand at all. Now, you may want to still take a sanding block to the edges that are lasered on Chantal's pieces. But this is not taking off that much paint. It's taking it off around the edges, and sometimes that's just the look I want. That's all I want. I don't want to take off a lot. If you have an electric sander, you could also use that. I tried to do something that would be maybe a little bit more easy for most people to do. I do have sanders and I have used them before, but I thought I would try this time, especially for a small piece that I want to be a little more detailed with where I actually sand. Now, it looks pretty good. You conceal your finished piece just like you would with a stained piece with a spray. I will tell you guys, I am going to actually use an antiquing wax for mine. And the reason I'm going to use an antiquing wax for mine is because we are not even close to being where I want to be finished. I like this. It looks good. However, I think it could be better. So I ended up putting the antiquing spray on, which can serve as your sealant here. And I am using a wax brush. I have a brush for my white wax, and then I have a brush for the antiquing wax. This will seal the paint. It gives it that nice finish. And it gives an antique look. So on the red especially, it's going to give it a little bit more of an antiqued look. You can also see that it kind of brightens everything up really pretty. So I wanted to finish it like this to show you this layer, I guess, or this finish. Keep in mind, I actually went a little bit further with this after letting it sit for, I don't know, a week. This was finished a long, long time ago. I let it sit for quite a while, kind of marinating, thinking on it. What do I want to do? I did end up having to sand off the wax since I went ahead and applied it, because at this point I thought, oh, I like this. This looks good. And it does. I just wanted mine to have a little bit more of a wood grain distressed appearance. But this is awesome. And I think that the antiquing wax really shows on the red. And here I am simply taking a piercing tool, a stylus would also work, and I am going to remove any wax, any paint from the cut lines in the sled. And then we're going to paint the back. And I'm just going to speed this up a little bit because it is the exact same technique as the front. So what I end up doing after I have added my paint and painted the back just like the front, added the antique wax just like the front, is I did end up letting this sit for quite a while. And what I eventually came down to is in the meantime, I had applied the stain to the large sled, which I had intended to do the whole time. I just wanted to show a different technique, as I mentioned, for this. And I thought, it's just not quite what I want. What can I do to give this sled a little bit more of a vintage feel, even more than what it is right now? Now, it does look pretty good. I had a couple of little boo-boos in a couple of areas, which also allowed me the ability, or gave me the permission, I suppose. There doesn't really have to be permission, but I decided, you know what, let's just sand off. Let's sand off the wax. Let's sand it off. Let's sand the piece a little bit more and see if we can make it better. And what I ultimately decided was I'm going to take this detail sander and I'm going to take a much, much more gritty sandpaper, and I'm going to sand the heck out of this. So basically I am sanding off with a finer grit sandpaper. I sanded the red area. I'm really concentrating on the actual sled where you would put, where someone would sit, or you would, drag your presents, I guess, back behind the horse. But I am going to sand it. I'm going to sand and sand. And I'm sanding all in one direction on purpose because it's going to help with that wood grain appearance. And I instantly knew that I loved it. That is more the look I'm going for. I like the red. I like it sanded a little bit, but I don't want to go too crazy with my sanding of the red. We're going to sand off a little bit more to give it a little bit more of a weathered appearance, but I'm going to try not to go overboard. I kind of got a little aggressive. Now, I did go 2 directions on the red portion because here that didn't bother me quite so much. On the brown portion, I wanted it all one direction. Now I'm going to sand both the front and the back. Once I am done sanding this, you want to make sure that your piece is free of all of the dust and all of everything you've sanded off. So make sure you take a nice dry cloth, wipe it completely clean. If you use a very lightly damp cloth, I did. It kind of helped pick up some of the fibers that I missed. let it dry. Let it dry all the way. It won't take very long. You definitely don't want to get it wet per se, but if it's a little damp, that's okay. And once it's completely clean and dry, we're going to go back with the antiquing wax and put on another layer, and that is going to be the finishing layer. And the antiquing wax is really going to settle in the grooves of where we have sanded off the paint color on the piece. Now imagine doing this on the bigger sled or any other piece that you might be working on. It would be amazing. Absolutely amazing, you guys. The paint looks fantastic. It's all about layers. In almost all the crafting I do, I consider it in layers, whether it's paper crafting or finishing cross stitch or even quilting or project bag type of projects. You work in layers. And so for this layer, I imagine it as the paint layer, the initial sanded layer, and then I sanded that off. And I did get too aggressive with the sanding of the red, but I really did have to remove the wax I had applied to the top. So I'll go back and add a little bit more paint in, almost a dry brush technique. I'm not going to worry too much about super full coverage, but go ahead and add a little bit more if you need to. Now, if you hadn't applied antiquing wax, you would not need to do that, but I did. So I always also consider it that there are no mistakes. If the first thing doesn't work, you can generally fix it. If you have an electric sander, you could have sanded it all off and started over. So it really, however you want to do that. So that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. We want it to dry. We want to flip it over. We want to paint the other side. So let's see where we're at now. It looks good. And now I'm going to be very gentle. I think I left the same sandpaper on, but I'm going to be gentle. We want to rough up the edges and we don't want to take all of the red off. I still want red to be very prominent, but I do want it to look aged. This is also a fantastic tool to take off any paint that might be on the edges. You can see I'm definitely not using the muscles to remove all the sand or all the paint, pardon me, with my sandpaper. Okay, when we have this the way we like it, it's time for the antiquing wax, and then we are ready to actually finish our cross stitch piece. So antiquing wax, again, is really going to pick up into all those areas that we've sanded off. Give it a nice dark color. I'm just kind of making sure that it's nice and covered. It's going to seal everything beautifully. It's going to age it up. It darkens the red just a little bit, kind of like the darker brown inks did in the large sled finishing tutorial. I don't know about you guys, but painting is one of those things that once I get going, I can kind of keep fiddling with it. I don't know why. I really enjoy the whole paint process of playing with the paint and sanding and adding wax. It's a whole thing. It's relaxing to me. And again, removing any wax buildup because I got a little, for some reason, I also love the wax and I used way too much, but that's okay. Now, once it's on here, I did let it sit for just a little bit before buffing off any of the excess with a dry cloth, but you do want to buff any of that off. So just removing. If you don't have a sharp piercing tool like this, maybe if you have toothpicks, that would also work. Just something sharp. Or maybe even a dental pick. Just making it nice and clean. And then we're going to set it aside for a little bit. Once it's nice and cured, like I would probably let it sit a day. Mine sat for like 2 weeks. But then you can come back and finish it. I could have finished it really probably right away. I just didn't. I had contemplated how I wanted to finish. Sometimes I like to do that. I do things in phases where I let it sit and I look at it for a while, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I know what I want to do. So for the finishing, I'm not going to mount my stitch on any extra fabric. There is not really room for it. The stitch basically fits the sled, and that is okay. It's very similar to the large sled, where that one also didn't really allow for room underneath if stitched on 28 count fabric or 14 count. If you stitched on 32 or 16 or 36 or 18, you likely will have more room, and you can absolutely mount this on another piece of press-on board wrapped with fabric if you want to. So I'm going to start by trimming down my stitch, and I just cut it from the larger piece of fabric. I'm leaving about an inch from the outermost stitched edge on all four sides. That's where we're going to start with. Oh, I just absolutely love my little Rudolph here. And then we are going to take some press-on board, and I have some scraps of press-on board, and I'm going to measure. The area we have is about 4 3/4, I think. And I want to measure my stitch, which it's about 3. I think the board is about 3 1/8 or 3 1/4. And I am going to trim a piece of press-on board. Now I'm going to leave it longer, because instead of cutting straight across, I'm going to I actually used a round die. If you have Chantal's round templates, if you have a cup in your kitchen or a bowl, those will all work as well. What I did was I drew a line at the uppermost point, and I very much rounded the edges along the top and the bottom of the short sides. If you do not want to do that, if you don't want to mess with it, you can leave it straight. I just wanted to mention that that is how I got the effect that I did. Then I cut 2 pieces of batting, and I adhered one to the sticky side and the other one right on top. I also grabbed a couple of snowflake buttons from my stash. I believe these are from, yep, Good Story. I will try to find a link and add that in the supply list. But any kind of button, I bet Just Another Button Company has some too. I know these are not from them, but I wanted to mention that. And I'm going to add 2 buttons to this. Now, part of the reason I'm able to do that, as I was looking at this, I actually didn't stitch snowflakes in this uppermost left corner, and I could have. And I could go back and stitch more, but I kind of like the addition of the dimensional buttons for the finish. So I'm simply stitching these on, and then I will attach my cross stitch piece to the press-on board wrapped in batting. I personally use 2 layers of warm and white batting. That is the batting I like for my quilt. I have lots of scraps of it. It is thinner, so I do use 2 layers because that's just the look I like. If you use a different kind of batting and it's thicker, you probably only need 1. Or maybe you don't like it to be quite as thick, or maybe you like it thicker, so use whatever you like. I've got some finishing dots from Fat Quarter Shop, and I'm going to place those in the bottom corner. You could lace this. I am showing you, even though I rounded the top and the bottom, I did not lace it. I am going to fold it in, and I'm going to wrap it around. This is an ornament. I just did not feel the need to have to lace it, and I think it turned out beautiful. I want to make more. I really think this might be kind of fun to make these as commemorative ornaments for kids, for my kids. This could be this year's if I would stitch more of these up. We'll see. I always have the best plans, and they don't always come to fruition. And then I'm using the finishing tape as well. So it's almost like a straight finish where I do the finishing dots in the corners, and then I take the finishing tape and wrap it around. And I wrap those the short edges first because those are the curved edges, and those are the ones I really needed to have tight and look good. Well, I want the sides to look good too, but you know what I mean. I want those to be perfect before I finish off the long sides. And I'm wrapping it nice and tight, smoothing. Small finishes to me are so much easier than the bigger pieces. There's no borders here, so I don't really have to worry too much about lining anything up. It's working great. Okay, and let's wrap this one just like so. Oh, I love it so much, but I love the rounded shape of this. Completely inspired by the sled itself, you guys. If it was straight, it would be fine. But I love this because it follows the shape of the sled. So don't be afraid to follow the shape of your finishing piece. Obviously, if you're doing a round, you want to do a round finish. But if you have something like this, you can totally do that. So now I did not have my bow tool at the time of doing this finish. I really need to redo a video once I have the bow tool. I am going to link up in the corner of the screen to my bow tutorial. I did this last year. I did an ornament finish and I shared how to make this bow. It is a wrap around the fingers type of maneuver. I don't think I end up liking this one. I redid it. I pulled the loops too much, I think. If you don't like it, you can take it out and redo. Yeah, I didn't like that one. This green ribbon, it is something from some packaging that I got a while ago. I considered taking the twine that I used for the sled and using it on this, but I just didn't like it. I don't think we need it. This is such a smaller finish. I decided to not do that. We added buttons. I also considered adding greenery up at the top. I didn't like that as well. It just seemed like way too much for this. We've got a bow. We're going to have some rusty jingle bells. We're going to have some wood beads. I think we've got the embellishments covered for this, but go crazy. Do whatever you like. And if you don't have a bow tool, this little wrap around the fingers trick works really good. And again, that is up in the corner of the screen. Check out my video tutorial from last year for that. I love this ribbon. I got my rusty jingle bells. I have those linked down in the description as well. You're going to see these a lot this holiday season. I absolutely love them. So hot glue time. We are going to hot glue our piece to the sled just like this. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so much fun. I am getting so excited for Christmas ornament creating. I don't know about you guys, but this just sealed it for me. Okay, I did thread some beads on. If you want to see that a little more in depth, I did that in the finishing tutorial for the large sled. You're just threading them on. This is actually some lawn trimmings twine. It's nice and thin. It works great. And then I'm knotting on the back of the sled. I'm going through the front. This took 9 beads and I just alternated with these 2 colors. And then I'm knotting around enough times that knot isn't going to come back through the front. The sled, much easier than the large finish. And this, you can do any kind of finish you want here, but I love these wood beads. I think they look amazing when hung on the tree. And I just like them anyway for the sleds. There we go. All right, up at the top, we're going to glue our bow down. I'm going to notch the ends. I'm just going to take my scissors and notch those. Kind of hate wasting any of this beautiful ribbon since I don't have any more. But if you get ribbon or like twill on some things you buy, save it. It's perfect for finishes. I love repurposing things like that. Now, before we attach the bow, I think I already have a needle that has some thread on it. I'm going to run that through the back of my bow, and I am going to thread the jingle bells on there and secure that so that they are all kind of glued on. Now these are some small Tim Holtz. I know I used the large ones. They were called machine heads. I don't think that's what they're called. They are listed down below in the description, but I did pull them out. On the large and small sleds from 141 Design, there are scored lines, circles, not lines, circles that work perfectly with those machine heads. There are not those details for the sled. It's a small sled. However, I loved that little detail so much that I decided to go ahead and replicate that, and I am going to glue those down. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and guessing at this point. So here I have some thick, I use crochet thread. I use crochet thread a lot because it's a lot stronger, and I'm just going to thread my jingle bells to my bow, just to the back, because I'm not adding anything to the bow this time. No cross-stitched button, no fabric covered button. I just didn't feel like I needed it. I really, really love this green satin bow, and I think the jingle bells are plenty for the ornament. And I'm just gonna knot that and secure it, and then we'll hot glue it to our sled. Or you might drop it and get the jingle bell in the hot glue and make a ginormous mess and end up getting it all over your fingers because it's hot glue. And what would a crafting session with hot glue be if you didn't burn your fingers at least once? That may or may not have happened. All right. Oh, and I need some more hot glue. There we go. Perfect. For the machine heads, you could use hot glue, but my experience there was not that great. So I ended up grabbing my E6000. These are so tiny. Paper crafters, you probably have embellishment wands. You're going to see that in action. I'm going to pick up these little teeny tiny embellishments with kind of my helping hand. And even my finishers, grab one of these tools. I will link it down below. It is fantastic. You can also get them on Amazon. I will find a link to them on Amazon if you're picking up some other things from there anyway. But they're great for embellishments on cards and things, which is what I use it for 99% of the time. But for this, it also allowed me to keep my fingernails out of the glue. So I am simply picking it up from where I put it down. It's kind of sticky, adding a little bead of glue or a lot of bead of glue, and gluing that down. Now I need to go clean my hands because they have E6000 all over them. And there is my finish. Thank you guys so much for joining me for the sled ornament finishing tutorial. I hope this has inspired you to make some Christmas ornaments this year. If you love this video, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and let me know if you would like to see more Christmas ornaments this fall and winter, because I think that could be really fun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, click that like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to always be notified when I have a new Flosstube stitching or quilting video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.